Hey everybody, Kate Payne here from Standing Out Online, and welcome to my July episode of Coffee with Kate. I'm happy to have you all here. And if you're watching on the replay, just remember you can still ask questions even on the replay, and we will get back to you. So I am excited to bring in my two guests today, Jim Fuse, who is a personal friend of mine and also my podcast producer, and Mark Johnson, who is a very highly regarded journalist from Vermont. And I've known Mark a very long time. And it is my honor and privilege to have him as a guest. And I'm a little bit nervous having him here because he's like this premier broadcaster to me. So hello, Mark.
And I hope, like Jim, I'm your friend too.
You are absolutely. So I'm going to introduce briefly each of them a little bit. We're going to start with Mark. So Mark has been a journalist in Vermont since 1982. He actually had he was the host of the Mark Johnson Show on a local radio station in Vermont, which I listened to just about every single day, which was a 2-hour daily public affairs show. And he was on for 25 years. He interviewed public policymakers, authors, politicians, experts, locally and nationally. And I've always loved his approach because he's very informal and yet he's really smart. And he always wants to get the story behind the story. That's one of his little, isn't that one of your little mantras, Mark?
My tagline, yes.
Your tagline, yes. He's also hosted numerous election debates on radio and television, and is a regular panelist on Vermont Publics, which is basically Vermont's PBS station, roundtable news program, Vermont This Week. So anyway, Mark, welcome. Thank you for being here today. I'm so glad that you're going to bring the journalist perspective about what we're going to talk about going beyond the algorithm and how long form content is what people need to be thinking more about.
Thanks for
inviting me. And then there's Jim, who many of you have met a few times. Jim is a video expert. He's a podcast expert. He's become a Substack expert, and he is my go-to person for all things Substack because I'm really starting to I'm just sort of getting started with building a Substack presence. We're actually streaming to Substack live right now too, and also to Jim's. So, and Jim is also my background podcast producer, doing all the techie things in the background. So, welcome, Jim.
It's great to be here, and I also want to thank Mark for being here. And I don't know how much he's seen it, but the world of journalism is really growing on Substack for those folks that want stuff that is, I guess, fair and balanced. Maybe that's a good way to put
it. Yes. All right. So to kick this off, this is what we are talking about today: is building trust with long form content. And so, there's a lot of people that still go over to Instagram or Facebook. They're on the Meta channels. And they're all like, yeah, but short is what sells. People want to see short content. They're not going to read the long stuff. And that may be true over there. But more and more, especially on LinkedIn, and you all know how much I love LinkedIn, and I'm really growing into understanding Substack more. Long form content is probably more important than ever to pay attention to. It doesn't mean everything you put out has to be long form. It can be short and long blended together. But long form content is where you can build trust. And so that's where I kind of wanted to start today and kick off this conversation with my guests. Is we are at this point right now, we're in this trust recession in our world because of all the AI noise and the AI slop. That's another term I've heard recently, and I like the term. And I use AI, but I use it ethically, responsibly. I use it as a collaborator. I do not use it as a crutch. And so in this day and age, you need to show up and show who you are as a person, probably more now than ever, because people are questioning if anything's real anymore. Is that a real profile? Is that a real video? So from where each of you sit, one is a journalist, one is a content creator, what's changed and why does long form content feel like the answer to this? Who wants to go first?
Let's have Mark go first.
Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Well, fundamentally, I would answer that question in most of the subjects that I cover really can't be covered in short form. We're debating things here in Vermont like education reform, problems in downtown Burlington with fentanyl, homelessness, and the complexities that's showing up for businesses and people that have lived in Burlington. To try to do these stories in 3 or 4 minute news broadcasts, or even in some of the shorter stories that appear in newspapers, it feels irresponsible to me. You just can't really get into the nuances of this. So, just as a practical matter, I do my podcast in conjunction with a TV station, and a long story on a TV station is 3 or 4 minutes. I
Right.
have the luxury of having interviews that run 45, 50 minutes. Now, so I can really get into, some real meat on that. Now, the downside of it is that I taught one college course, a journalism course at one of our local colleges. And I began the course, there were 17 or 18 kids in the class. And I asked at the beginning of the class, so where do y'all get your news from?
Mhm.
And they, to a person, said TikTok. And I just about walked out of the room. And I thought, well, that's just heartbreaking to me, because you can't really get any kind of nuance in something like TikTok. So, I really look at it as a practical matter, that trying to get into some of these really complex issues in a short form, I try to do short form stuff to kind of tease people
Right.
to listen to the long form. But I don't know how people get into some of these complex issues in a shorter period of time.
Right. So when you think about like the national authors that you used to interview on your show, and you were probably vetting them in some way, right? You were probably doing some research, doing your due diligence, right, before you had them as a guest, so that you weren't just reading their bio on the back of the book jacket, right? So would you go and take a look at like their LinkedIn presence or even their social media presence, just to get a feel for the kind of content they might post?
I would look at anything I could get my grubby hands on. I had One of the key things I had was a number of people that helped me book those people,
Okay.
and they had great credibility. So, they, in a sense, kind of pre-vetted them for me. But yeah, I mean, I would look at their LinkedIn profile. I mean, one of the really nice things about LinkedIn is that it's got its own verification system.
Mhm.
I mean, you go on Facebook these days, I don't know how many requests you get for friends from people. Generally they're quite beautiful women, but they don't actually exist. And sometimes their pronouns are he, him, which
Mhm.
can be kind of a tip off.
Mhm.
So, I think one of the things that's an issue out there, you talked about AI, you talked about, veracity and truth. I mean, I feel like LinkedIn, I feel the same way about Substack, that these are really vetted sites that, there are verification processes that you have to go to get your stuff on there.
Right. I'm so glad that LinkedIn brought that in. All right, Jim, what about you? When you think about, from the content creation side, and you do both written, you do Substack, you do video, you do a combination of all of the mediums. What do you think has changed about why long form content is probably now more important than ever?
Well, I think Mark hit on some really key points, and one is the fact that a lot of these issues are something you can't talk about in 30 seconds,
Mhm.
and so we have to be able to spell things out. I also look at it from the perspective of people learn differently.
Mhm.
I've been a college professor, do workshops as well, and so some people read and that's how they learn. Some people watch, some people listen. That's why podcast, video, and writing still hasn't gone away, and I don't think it will. But the problem we run into is that people are getting lazy
Mhm.
and they're not questioning things. And I think especially even more so with a lot of these issues, like Mark was talking about, we need to educate ourselves. We need to dive deeper and not just go with a soundbite as the answer. And so I think, as an example with video, you know, and like right now, we're doing a long form video. By being live, we're able to engage with our audience. You know, we've
Right.
got, several people watching us on Substack, no questions yet. But the thing is that we can respond to them in real time.
Hmm.
They know they're speaking to real people. I don't think the avatars have completely figured that out yet. But I think that's a trust factor too, is that, I want to know that I'm talking or getting stuff from a real person. Now, to Mark's point earlier about the challenge of how do I get points across, if I've got several points in a thing, what I've started to do is make those points into a series of short videos,
Snippets.
because I think it's hard to just like, oh, I'm going to do this one, and I hope they're going to go back and watch the rest of the story. So I think that has become helpful. But the long form also gives you the ability to share those pieces in so many different ways among all the platforms. And where, like, well, what I'll even do is when I create a video on Substack on my publication, I'll have a writing, that goes along with it, make it an article or post. The verbiage gets confusing. And then I'll make that a LinkedIn article, but I make people go to Substack or YouTube to watch the video.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like, if you want to watch the video demo, you got to go somewhere else. Because ideally I want them on Substack, because I get their email list on my email list if they subscribe.
Right.
And you own your subscribers. You can now do other things with them. If Substack goes away, I've got that list. I can tell the people that really care about my stuff where I've moved to. So I think that's what I see as how this long form stuff is helping it. And because we have to remember, not everybody watches video, or to
Right.
Mark's point, they're watching it on TikTok and they're not catching everything.
Right. Well, thanks for that. So one of the things I've been doing in my own strategy with my own content is that, LinkedIn is still my go-to place. I usually only post once, maybe twice a week, depending. But I usually do a shorter post on LinkedIn. And then I take a version of the content of that post and I do a longer form post over on Substack like the following day, because I'm trying really hard. My personal strategy is to have sort of a marriage, if you will, between LinkedIn and Substack, but not a replication of content either. So I'm still working on it, and I think it's building, and I think some of these things take time. I think a lot of people expect that all of these things are just going to happen overnight or in 2 days and everybody's going to be viral on Substack or something like that. And when you're doing long form content, it's also a slow dance process in getting people to engage with your content. It's just, you got to be strategic, you got to be consistent, and you've got to show up. And when you do that over time, that also is part of what's building trust for your personal brand too. So that's where I was kind of coming from on that. All right. So thank you both for sharing that. And so now, Mark, I have a question just for you. When you're working on a story, and let's be clear, I'm from Vermont originally, and Vermont is a small state, 645,000 population. Is that what it is now? And I moved 4 years ago. But when I was there, I was, an executive director of a women business membership organization. I was involved in Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility. I was active in politics then, in the background. So when you live in a small state like that and you're sourcing people, you probably have some kind of a relationship. You already know them. And so and then you know who to go to and call back. And of course, you've been around a long time, saying that with love, Mark, that you can just, send an email or a text and people are going to answer you, even if they're on a different side of maybe where you're coming from. That's one of the nice things I always loved about Vermont. But when you're working on a story and you're looking for a source or an expert, maybe somebody you don't know or want to know, what does your vetting process look like?
Well, as you said, one of the beauties of being in Vermont is that I may not know that person, but chances are I know somebody that does know that person. So, for example, if I were to attend, which I had in the past, go to the VBSR, Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility, they would have a 2-day conference every year. and I would bring my equipment when I was working at WDEV to that. And I would generally talk to people that were involved in that organization and say to them, who's coming? Who do you suggest would be a good person for me to talk to? And so I leaned pretty heavily on other experts and didn't really do all the heavy lifting myself, which, for one, made a little less work for me. But more importantly, I think, you would know, for example, because you invited these people to come to the event, who would be, you'd say to me, this is a really good person for you to talk to. And so, I kind of leveraged other people, and I did the same thing nationally. I had a number of, sort of booking agents who I got to be quite tight with over the years. And, the joke is that you're only as good as your last guest. But, people that would provide me really good guests were people that I established relationships with. And just like life in general, the relationships that you establish are really how you become successful as a talk show host, as a person, as a friend. So
Right.
that's how I did it.
All right. But you must have still done some of your due diligence by looking at some online stuff if you needed to, right? Or your team would.
No, I mean, no question about it. I mean, thanks for reminding me how long I've been doing this. But the truth is, I started doing this before the internet. Okay.
Right.
I worked at.
So did I when I was a meager little journalist.
And it's sort of hard to believe. I mean,
I know.
people look at you and they go like, "What?" I mean, were you living in a cave? And for example, when I was at the Burlington Free Press, we had an entire room that was the size of most people's living room that was called the clip file room. And there were two women that would take 5, 6, 7 copies of the paper and cut out articles and put them into a folder.
Right.
And that would be where you would go to get information on, this highway project that you were going to write about. I mean, the internet has kind of made life easy for all of us. There is, I find now it's really, I'm just sort of one of those people, but I'm a little skeptical because this whole introduction of AI, we, for example, now in Vermont have a news publication that it is pretty obvious to me is AI driven.
Oh, geez.
And what is happening is this person who's organizing it, for one thing, he's got a full-time job as the director of development for a town. And I'm thinking, well, how is this guy putting out more content than some other organizations with a whole staff of reporters? So
there's some doubt right there, right? Like there's some doubt about that.
Yeah, and it just reads funny,
Yeah.
I mean, it just sort of reads. It's a little too polished. So, I will, double check those kinds of places, triangulate them.
Right.
The same thing's happening with books. There was recently a guy here who grew up in Vermont who wrote a book about Bernie Sanders. And, the book was just riddled with errors, wrong dates, wrong spellings of names. And I'm one of those nudges that when I see that, it really raises a flag to me. Then I say, well, if you can't even get the date right that Jim Jeffords left the Republican Party, or it's 2 different dates within a 4-page area. But, I mean, the journalism world has been decimated. I mean, the Burlington Free Press, which you grew up on, used to be 3 sections of 16 to 20 pages each. Now it is 16 pages a day. I mean, it's smaller than what my high school newspaper was.
Yeah.
The same thing is happening in the publishing world. So the number of people that are actually reading these books before they go out, I mean, that it's heartbreaking. And you really, as I say, if you get the wrong date on all these things, it just makes me wonder if you're getting the themes and the points across, if those are correct too.
Right. And I've just gotten to the point now, especially since I'm online as much as I am. I mean, the name of my business is Standing Out Online. I primarily work with entrepreneurs who are thought leaders in their industry, and I'm helping them to get visibility in various places and ways. But I'm not telling them, post on 6 places, post 3 times a day. I am completely antithetical to that kind of a strategy. So it's like, I want them to show up as a real person. I want to make sure that when they optimize their LinkedIn profile, that they have really optimized it well and not just have some of the basics, so that if somebody lands on their profile, they're like, oh, this is a real person. And so, so in this online world, that's really important. And I think more and more with AI coming out, that people are questioning it. Even if you just go through your feed and you see videos, you're like, that's definitely AI. You know, I mean, you can
Okay.
just tell.
Let me ask you something,
And
because
Jim, feel free to weigh in too.
so when I put out a podcast episode, which I did yesterday or the day before,
Yep, I listened to
will
it.
put it onto my Facebook page. I'll put
Mhm.
it onto my Twitter feed. I'll put it onto my LinkedIn page. I'll put it onto my Substack page. It's the same content that I'm putting on there. But what I'm hearing from you is that that's not necessarily the best strategy to do.
Well, it's a good that you're putting it up there, but are you putting it up there with any kind of context? Like, I interviewed Jill Korinsky, the retiring Speaker of the House for the state of Vermont legislature, and we talked about this, this, and this, and she actually made a point about blah, 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 and then you spotlight it so that you're teasing it in a written way and you're not just putting up the link.
Yeah.
Are you doing that?
Yeah, and I'm doing that probably more than when I first did it. I would just put up the episode, but I
Right.
did on the one
Yeah.
you mentioned, you know,
Yeah.
I mentioned why I was interviewing her.
Right.
And, you know, I did play into the sort of the way that you get eyeballs. She was the victim of a swatting incident.
Right. Right.
About a year ago. This is the Speaker of the House in the Vermont legislature, who's been in there for about 6 years, and had the Burlington police show up at her front door at 3 o'clock in the morning. Somebody had somehow gotten into her email system, sent an email to the Burlington police that said that her husband was abusing her. And the police showed up, you know, cruisers knocking and people knocking on the door. She had to come downstairs and answer the door and show them that she was okay. Now, you know, that's a pretty juicy story, right?
Yeah, it is.
So
Yep.
I put that in the preview in hopes that maybe you'll also listen to the other content too.
Yeah. And that's exactly the right strategy. You know, it's not
Hmm.
clickbait. I mean, if that's an aspect
Yeah.
of the story, but there is so much clickbait out there. You make a great point in saying this was real. People are still like, wait, is that real? And so that's why I think that when you have the medium to longer form content to give things context, to share a story that's whatever, it's going to legitimize it. And I think that's something that we just need to be more aware of in this day and age because of all the AI slop that's out there. So
Right.
Jim, what do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, well, we got a comment from Mitch Jackson over on Substack, and he says, try introducing an audio or video into evidence in court before a jury. Is it AI? The
Oh, yeah.
authenticity and foundation requirements have never been more important. And
Yeah.
I just think that's an extremely great point by Mitch. You know, and he does a lot with AI, but he
Mhm.
also sees the importance of the realness. And I think going back to what, you know, Mark was talking about too, is when we use this stuff on other platforms, and even like you talked about on LinkedIn, the other thing we have to worry about is, because a lot of times it even wants you to like, oh, just use our AI to respond to this comment.
Mhm.
No, you use your own voice,
Yes.
engage with other people. I think that's where people fall short too in being, you know, real is, you know, add your comments, but you know, don't use AI to do that.
Exactly.
It's like we're having a conversation right now.
Exactly.
Why do I need AI to be part of this conversation?
Exactly. Yep. Nope. You nailed it.
Yeah, you
So-
know, and that, you know, what I worry about is that, so I work for a news organization and always have. And I think if you see something on our local TV station, you can pretty much count on that's an actual video that they shot. Where I get worried is there's now this huge proliferation of citizen journalists who are
Mhm.
out there.
Mhm.
And you know, then they put stuff up on their site, their Substack, whatever, Facebook page, and you know, you can pretty much at this point make anybody do anything with through AI. So, you know, that's what I worry about, because it's sort of flattened out. If everybody is on the World Wide Web, then, you know, there is a question of who do you trust? And that's, as much as people say they don't trust the media, at least at most of these news organizations, there's a standard that
Standard, and there's ethics.
yeah, and you're going to get fired if if you put up something that is AI generated.
Yep.
But it's a brave new world out there, and it's scary.
Yep, it sure is. I mean, there's an upside to some of what you just mentioned from the standpoint of like the people I work with. So for example, I work with a really well-known expert in, she's a psychologist, she's in Seattle. She works with first responder couples in relationship counseling, but because her dad was a firefighter. And so she's recognized the issues that come up in a relationship, whether it's a marriage or a long-term relationship, with people who are first responders. So the content she puts out is sort of focused on her audience's first responder families, right? And so now she's kind of found her niche, if you will. So when she's trying to find visibility opportunities, like being a guest on a podcast, for example, the nice thing about some of these things and people having Substack and YouTube channels, quality ones, right, is that you don't have to try to pitch the mainstream media anymore for a PR or earned media hit, because it's so hard to get those, it's just hard. The mainstream media is looking at hundreds of pitches a day, right? So it's nice that there's some of these other alternative ways that exist. You just want to make sure that if you do become a guest on someone's podcast, do your due diligence. I'm saying this to the people listening right now, to make sure that, maybe it's not the most highly downloaded YouTube, but watch a couple podcasts. And if they seem like they're really quality conversations and they're produced well, then that might be worth your time. So, I've said to people, like, you can almost create, and I'm using this loosely, but you can also almost create, as the entrepreneur thought leader, your own network. You can be a guest on podcasts. You can do an online newsletter or an email newsletter. You can do a blog on your website if that's something you still want to do. So in this day and age, because of some of the tools, you can kind of get your own visibility out there and not just rely on trying to get on the Today Show or trying to get on your local, affiliate news station. So that's the upside, but the downside is clearly what you said. Jim, did you want to weigh in there? Oh, sorry, Mark.
No, I think too, viewer trends are changing, right? More people are using YouTube in a sense as their television. Yep. Right, because now you can watch it on your TV as an app. Of course, the fun thing is if you're on Apple TV and maybe one of the Google things, you can download the Substack app and actually be watching us live on TV on Substack.
Oh, so I didn't know that.
Just something fun, and you'll be able to watch the replay later, Kate. So. Okay. I think that's a lot of fun.
Well, I'll share something with everybody listening right now. And by the way, if anybody's listening and would like to ask a comment or make a question, put it in the comments, and I'm happy to answer your question here. And even if you're watching on the replay, if you have a question when you see it on LinkedIn or Facebook or Substack, put a question in and let me know and tag me, and I'll get an answer to you, whether it's from Jim or Mark. So I was just going to make a comment about something. Oh, so a little known secret about me is, and I think some of this comes from my journalism background. I am a fan of true crime. I don't mean I'm a fan of the crime. I'm a fan of like documentaries. I don't know. I get involved of wanting to help figure out why this happened or who this person is. And I think that really harkens back to my early, days in journalism and writing and doing feature stories. I want to know the piece. I want to help put the pieces of the puzzle together. That's really where my interest lies. So when there are certain high profile cases like the Nancy Guthrie case, for example, or the Lynette Hooker case, the woman with her husband in the Bahamas who's gone missing, I have now found through YouTube these podcast hosts that are doing these true crime shows. And a lot of them are former journalists in mainstream media, and they're really interesting. And that is sort of like one of my little, unknown hidden guilty pleasures. And I'm watching it because I find it fascinating. I want to help figure out the pieces of the puzzle, even just while I sit in my living room. But it is interesting because if there are certain high profile stories, you can get so much more in depth with some of these people that are really doing these great podcasts, because the guests they're getting are freaking amazing and they're legitimate, like, people. And I'm like, you would never see this on mainstream news in this, like, because of the 2, 3, 4 minute limit. You just don't see it. So anyway.
Well, you're the only one that listens to these. It actually, I've read that it's the #1 niche category.
Yeah. And that surprised me. And
Yeah.
even just saying it out loud, like, I'm declaring it, not that I have, hundreds of thousands of viewers watching me. But like, I'm almost a little embarrassed by it, but yet I find it, some of these hosts, their backgrounds in how they bring a perspective to a topic, is really, really interesting to me. And I just get hooked right in. So, all right. So Jim, I want to get your take on something now. When you think about, because you're really, you're a true video expert. I watch a lot of your videos. You just did a really cool test on a microphone that you did from like 600 feet away from your phone or whatever, outside. And you're creating all different types of content to help people who want to know more about video tech, but also about how to then show up on Substack. So when you think about like your strategies for your long form content, what did you try? Number one, what worked and what didn't work?
Well, that's a good question. I'm still trying to figure out that what works and what doesn't work. I think part of it is just being genuine and thinking about it, not so much about what I want to put out, but what is the people that are following me, subscribing to me, what is their pain point? I think it's remembering that when we're creating content that we're solving somebody else's problem.
Exactly.
I think that's where a lot of businesses fall short, is that they want to make it all about them. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about me. Nobody cares about Mark or Kate. They care about their problem. So if you approach things from problem solving first, and then think of ways of how can I get creative in as far as getting the hook in, right? That's part of the challenge, because of, going back to Mark's point about TikTok, it's his short attention span theater. And because even as an example, and I say it every once in a while, because I'm very proud of my daughter in California, who's got 2 young kids, but she did a TikTok video about a storage box, right? And she got 5 million views of that video.
Oh my
Wow.
God. Wow.
And I mean, I'm still waiting to get 5 million total views on my videos now, but but it's just that whole thing of, she figured out like, okay, I got to catch people's attention. How do I, show them the benefits and the features of this box? Because it's not like she's trying to sell herself. She's trying to sell the box. So it's kind of the same thing, whatever field we're in, what is the problem we're solving?
Right.
And how can I show you that I know the solution? Because we still, because even talking about, as an example, LinkedIn and Substack, we still have a bunch of people that don't know how to use it. We still have people that aren't on Substack, let alone, even if they're on LinkedIn. I think the reality is that it's probably 95% of the people on LinkedIn don't create content. That might even be kind. It may be even higher than that. So it's like,
you're not far off.
Yeah. So it's like, so I'm on LinkedIn and I'm posting all this stuff, but I'm not getting anything out of it. The problem is it's not about you getting anything out of it. It goes back to Mark talking about building relationships, building trust. And so if you're consistent, keep getting stuff out there, at some point, once people know what you do, you're just like, you know what? Kate can solve my problem when it comes to visibility. I'm going to hire Kate, right? So you get a lot of these lurkers that never like, never comment. And I've had that happen where people will say, oh, I really like your videos. It's like, I've never seen you like or comment on anything I've done. So I think my strategy has become more about, okay, as an example, that I think the microphone was a good example. It's like, okay, everybody does these videos where they're like, okay, I'm this close to the camera and look, this microphone sounds great. It's like, well, I'm 600 feet away from my camera and the microphone sounds great. When would you need to use a microphone from 600 feet? Well, maybe you're filming somebody up on a stage as an example at a campaign, but the audio, because he's speaking into a different microphone, isn't picking up on your camera. Like, hey, can you just clip this on your shirt. And now I can be that journalist in the crowd coming from different angles, because as we like to joke sometimes, the most important thing about you know, video is audio,
Yep.
Yeah.
and
Yep.
people forget
I
that.
always heard the
So,
term, you can forgive bad video, but you cannot forgive bad audio.
And
Yep.
spend the money on a decent mic. I mean,
Yep.
it really, you can get a digital recorder now for, $120,
Yep.
but spend the money on the microphone. Talking about the Substack thing, I've been noticing lately that a lot of people are locking up their name because, Substack has just exploded in growth. I reached the point where there's no way I'm going to get Mark Johnson. There are too many of us. But I've been noticing a number of my colleagues here in Vermont who don't post anything, but they've set up an account just in the future if they want to. And that may not be a bad idea for people to do. And Substack doesn't really seem to care if you don't post anything.
There's no algorithm, right, Jim? As you
well,
said.
there is.
But from the way
it's
you described it to me a couple months
but
ago.
sometimes I look at it more like Twitter, in the sense that if I follow Mark, if I follow you, when you post, it's going to show up in that feed. So that's where the notes feed. And then, of course, publication wise, if you subscribe to me, when I send something out, you're going to get it in your inbox. So that's where I think it's much more powerful. And then even when we compare it, because I haven't done enough A/B testing, but as an example, I'll repurpose a Substack article onto LinkedIn as a LinkedIn article. But the people that are subscribed to me on LinkedIn, are they opening it up as much as the people on Substack?
Right. Well,
because it's because even titles, right? Because I can title my Substack email what the topic is, where LinkedIn's like, Mark just produced another LinkedIn newsletter. Yeah, him and the 500 others that I get, that am I going to really read it?
Right.
Right. Mark, I don't know if I ever told you this. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Just going back to one thing you mentioned, this whole idea of trying to sell something, the moment you see sponsored at the top of something, I'm like, I'm not reading that.
Yep.
Yep.
I agree, for sure. Mark, when I first heard about Substack, I'm having this memory. It was literally, I think, at a VBSR event where you were doing your show live, and you had told me that I think it was at a VBSR event, that you and your daughter Stella had started doing a show together on Substack. And I'm like, what's Substack? And that had to be at least 7 years ago, if not more.
Yeah, that's probably about right. Yeah. And I don't, I can't even tell you where we found it. It was something that was just sort of fun. We were goofing around. I think what appealed to me is that, hosting sites were charging,
right? And
Substack was free. So, we would just kind of riff. We would go, on a trip to somewhere or go to an event, and then we would talk about it. Now, it
was actually really good.
Well, and I have to say, I mean, everybody brags about their kids, but my daughter is just one of these people. I edit the professional people that I edit. I have to spend quite a bit of time. I really debated at one point, do you take out the ums? Do you leave in the ums? Should people hear the true person? And then I thought, well, I'm going to do them a favor and clean this up a little bit. I can, my daughter and I can record something, and I literally just put it up. I mean, it's she's gifted, and she's just really got that kind of gift of gab in a good, interesting way. And then she'll ask me questions. It's like, you should be doing this.
Your wife
is, yeah.
Is Lauren Glenn still in charge of Channel 17 in Burlington?
She just a year ago sort of passed the torch. This is the big local public access station in Burlington. But yeah, she is, sort of the glue. Sort of the queen of public access TV in Vermont. Was really helped a lot of other stations start up. And yeah, so I mean,
She's
we
great.
are definitely a media family.
So yeah, so look where Stella got this from.
Right.
All right. So again, if anybody is listening on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, or Substack, feel free to ask a question, and we'll get it answered here for you online. All right. So if someone listening today wants to start showing up in a way that builds real trust, given all the various facets we've looked at, and then maybe even gets noticed by a journalist. So kind of put your journalist hat on, Mark, maybe even beyond the news side a little bit, just from, what's going to intrigue you about a person or a source. Where would you suggest they start? So I'll start with you, Mark, and then we'll go to Jim.
Boy, you don't get immediate trust. I guess the way I would answer that question is, you just be true. I mean, we all have 1,000 different Substack things we could listen to and watch. And the people that I find that I am continuing to follow are people that are real. There's the Heather Cox Richardsons of the world, okay? Like, she's making $5 million a year on Substack. And she, has got a background. She's a historian. She's able to put today's events into a context of, what does this mean in terms of what the founding fathers would say today? But, there are a couple of other people that I follow who, for example, there's a woman who runs a yoga center in California. I don't know how I found this woman. And, she writes in a way, and she's a single mom with a daughter. She writes about real issues that affect real people in a way that I read her stuff and I say, wow, here's a person who's being honest about how difficult this is, what the joys of it are. And, she's somebody that, and getting back to one of the points Jim made, you really don't want to be doing video or audio. It's not about you. It's about, Ken Squire, who I worked for, who owned WDEV Radio in Vermont, who was sort of and worked for CBS News. He was a very famous broadcaster.
He used to, just for people, for context, he used to actually call the races for the Daytona 500, right?
Yeah.
Everybody should know him.
When the race where Richard Petty ultimately won after the two cars, Bobby Allison and one other driver who I should remember who it is, crashed with each other on the final lap, and then Richard Petty ran through, is the #1 downloaded video on YouTube of all time.
Wow.
And he was, just the most humble guy. You'd never know that he was this big deal at CBS. And, when I worked for him, he and I would meet in his office, and I'd say, I'm struggling to come up with ideas. I had 10 hours a week of programming to fill.
Yep.
And he'd say, just do things that are relevant. And I know that sounds trite, but that was the thing that I funneled everything through.
It's true.
So I really feel like I've done some of the best stuff that I've ever done in the last 3 years with this podcast. One of the most popular podcasts I did was with a woman who helps people find their lost dog.
Wow.
And she found a dog that had been out in the woods and on the run for 4 months. And, she's just the most genuine person. I called her 2 weeks ago when one of our dogs ran off, and I said, Sue, what do I do? She, and so, you might say to yourself, wow, who cares about that? But, you lose your dog.
Yeah.
Your dog takes off and you can't find them in a couple hours.
Scary.
Nothing else matters.
Exactly.
So, those kinds of shows have been incredibly popular. I mean, I do try to talk about, we have this fentanyl crisis like so many cities in America, but it's kind of new to Burlington, Vermont, which, was a little exceptional, shall we say, for a while. But, I think it's really all about, what you build trust by being real, by being vulnerable, by being honest, and making it relevant to people's lives.
Right. I'm going to share something, Jim. I'll get to you in a second. We still got a little bit of time left. So about 4 years ago, there's these two women who are in the public relations world, and they held a day-long conference that I paid big bucks for to teach. They only took 20 women entrepreneurs, and it was a day-long sort of seminar, if you will, in Manhattan. And they were very well connected to a lot of people in mainstream media, especially in New York. So they had a panel. They had a podcast panel. They had a print panel, like for Real Simple magazine, things like that. And then they had other types of panels. So they brought in producers, editors, correspondents to sort of share what they're looking for. And what I was really interesting, and I think that this is still true today, is that back a long time ago in my days of traditional PR, you would have a PR agency create a press release. We used to fax it out and then, and then things changed. You email it out, but then your lead, your hook, your subject line is the make or break piece to get anybody's attention, because they're receiving hundreds of these a day. Anyway, what all of these panels said in common was, if you are an expert in your industry, if you are a thought leader in your industry, and you want to pitch us to do a story on a problem you solve, right? Then we want to hear directly from you. And they all said this, like, you're going to get a list from these women that hosted this event. And by the way, to attend this one-day event was $3,000. So it wasn't like $150 thing. It was really, really targeted and focused. We want to hear you pitch us, not pitch us why you know everything you know. We want to hear what your idea is, what your hook is. And then maybe at the end, just give us a couple links to check your website out and maybe check you out to know that you're legit. But also, make sure if you reach out to us, you let us know that you've read our magazine, or you've read our blog, or you have seen episodes on a similar topic on our show. Because if you're just trying to like spray and pray to get media, we'll see through it. So it's just interesting now, because now the world has changed, where it's like people are sending these sort of personal pitches, if you will, from their own email. And it's just interesting to me. I'm curious if that's happened with you, Mark. Do people pitch you?
No, I haven't, but I guess the similar thing that is a new phenomenon to me. My daughter's boyfriend shoots video for high school football and lacrosse. And the new thing now is that when you want to get into a college, he will create a 6-minute highlight reel of you.
Really?
And yeah, and that goes in with the application. And I thought, wow, and he's making good money. He shoots the game for the high school, and then parents come up to him after the game and say, "Hey, Billy wants to go to the University of North Carolina, a real powerhouse lacrosse thing. Could you make up a highlight reel of him?" And he shot so much video at the game. But I haven't gotten that with guests per se. But, one thing I would say is that, it's great to have your publicist call, but, sometimes I've had people that have called me directly, and you get a phone call from somebody who's directly a guest, and it's hit or miss, right? I mean, you could be like, oh my God, but if this woman had called me up and said, I have information I want to get out and help people find their dogs. There was a dog that I found after 4 months who was on the run. Got my attention.
Exactly. Yep.
Have a good story to tell, and tell it quickly.
It is exactly. And that's what all of these people are like. We want maybe 3 short paragraphs on this. Right. If we want more information, we will ask for it.
Yeah.
But tell us what your hook is, what your hook is, why it should matter. Give me a couple links to know that you're real, and we'll check you out and leave it at that. And so, that's kind of more of the way of the world now. Jim, did you want to weigh in on what we just talked about?
Well, I think one of the things I'm seeing going along, if you want to call it with pitches, is I think that's part of the challenge problem with AI is you're getting these emails where people are using AI to make it sound like they know you.
Right.
But a lot of times you can say, well, I can tell you really don't know me because the way this email comes across. Right? Like, oh, well, your show does all this. It's like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And so I think that is one of the things that I see. But I also see, to Mark's point, there are definitely some new opportunities because of, if you want to call it, the drop in the price of technology. I have a friend, Joe Dexter, who on Substack, they're actually streaming like their high school, and I think even doing some like minor league, sports in their community. And it's really helped his business grow, because this isn't something we could easily do. Because, like you were joking, Kate, before the show about how, Mark says he had a, face for radio. I used to do high school soccer play-by-play on the radio, and this was between about 2014 to 16, because the technology wasn't quite there yet for us to be able to stream the games. But imagine if we could have streamed it, how much of a difference that could have made, even for advertisers. Because I think now with, because that becomes a thing with radio. It's like, well, how do I know anyone's listening to it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I don't even know, and this might sound horrible, maybe not. I don't know that I listen to the radio anymore.
Yeah.
Right. We
Hardly
listen
ever.
to music on our music apps,
Mhm.
and we get our news from all
Podcasts.
these different sources. We listen to podcasts, but to actually listen to the local radio station is something that's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. So Mark, just to
sure.
qualify, that was a joke you made to me years ago that you had a face for radio.
Okay.
I do not believe that you have a face for radio. Just saying.
You have
Well,
a face for TV, so
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be on broadcast, a broadcast journalist. And then after I worked at CBS News in New York as an intern for 2 years, I was like, I'm not so sure I really want to be on corporate broadcast. But I
you
loved what
sure
I
wouldn't wanna
learned.
be-
there.
You sure
Huh?
wouldn't want to be working there now. I mean, what's
Oh,
happened to
no.
the biggies is just it's criminal.
It's awful. I don't even want to go there. But that's why, though, on the upside of this is that, if you are somebody who is wanting to get more visibility, that's the bottom line of this conversation today.
Yeah.
If you want more visibility, you need to find where your audience lives online. And even if you don't think they live on LinkedIn, then think about how you position yourself on LinkedIn. How do you show up? What's your presence? Because people will be vetting you. If you pitch yourself to a podcaster, they are going to check you out. They're going to do their due diligence, and they're going to type your name into Google, and your LinkedIn profile is going to show up if you have a LinkedIn profile. That could be the place where somebody gets a first impression of you. So don't just take shortcuts on your LinkedIn profile, build it out, and think of it as a mini landing page of you. And then think about, well, where else do I show up online? And if you haven't done anything in your business over on Facebook and Instagram, one or the other or both, maybe your audience isn't over there. So why waste your time there? So I have a business account on Instagram, and I'm not posting over there anymore. I wasn't getting any engagement. I'm not saying like I didn't get a client. Like, I'm not posting online to get a client. I'm posting online to build trust and build relationships and build connection. And then if anything comes from that after the fact, and I have been nurturing that and taking it for years. And that's a big part of what I even teach my clients too. So anyway, I want to thank you both so much for being here. This was a really interesting show for me. And Mark, like I said, it was an honor to have you.
Can I just say one more thing real quick? I think
sure,
one of the points we're making too is that, the traditional media were sort of the gatekeepers, and now you can bypass that. So if you've got a good quality product on Substack or in LinkedIn, you can kind of create your own media outlet without having to, go through somebody like me or a CBS or whatever. And that's encouraging, and it's powerful.
It is. And, and I will say, I am a user of AI. I used to use ChatGPT, and then I just decided from an ethical standpoint, I switched over to Claude in the last few months. And, they all have their place. They all have their thing. But again, I'm using it as a collaborator to help me put things into a flow, help me to organize my thoughts. Because, I was trained as a writer. I'm a pretty good writer. I'm not the greatest writer, but and so when I use a tool like that, I'm not using prompts. I'm talking to it like I'm having a conversation. And the more I do that, the more that AI tool learns my voice to a point. And then when I get that content, I put it in Word or Google Doc, and then I add my own voice. I want to make sure it sounds like me. And so, that's a really good way to still use a tool to help you be efficient, to help you get some ideas and inspiration. Just, don't use these tools as a crutch, and build relationships with people. It's probably more important now than ever. It's always been important. But I think with all this AI stuff, I think that really knowing you're connecting with real people and that you are being yourself too, is not pie in the sky. It's the way it needs to be. It's fact.
Well, people will see through it. I mean, as I
Yeah.
said, there's this site now in Vermont that's become very popular, and you read it and you just go, yeah, this is just a little too, it's almost a little too perfect.
Exactly.
And it just
Yep.
doesn't feel real. And I read it because I read everything, but I also, I kind of just, and I could just tell that it wasn't a
Right.
real person writing this stuff.
Right. Do you remember before COVID, there was that video that came out? It was a dad. He was home. He was on CNN or something like that. He's like in a jacket and tie and shirt, and the door behind him opens, and his little toddler comes in on the little wheelie thing, right? And he's mortified. And then the wife comes in and she's trying to grab it, and the toddler runs in, and they're running out. And everybody was like, he was mortified. And yet then COVID happened and we were all online for a long time, and everybody's like showing up in their pajamas practically. And so, or
Right.
your dog was at your feet. So now in this day and age, like Mark, when we were in the green room before we got on here, you were like, I've got 2 dogs. They're not really, I don't know if they're going to make noise. And I'm like, well, I've got my dog here. And so people are more forgiving about some of that stuff. I would rather see that and know that this is like genuine than to have it be perfectly, there you go. And rather than being
Fast asleep.
perfect, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I just think that that's part of what builds trust, is when we're all just being ourselves. So,
But I did put on a pair of pants, not wearing a bathing suit. Just saying.
so anyway, back to we're wrapping up here. So if anybody has questions, if you're seeing this on the replay, thank you for watching on the replay. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments and tag me, and I will get back to you, and I'll respond to your question even afterwards. Most people do watch the replay. For those of you who watch live today,
where do you find the
it'll
replay?
show up. Well, because I invited you as a speaker on LinkedIn, the
Okay.
replay will actually show up in your LinkedIn feed or your notifications.
Okay.
But I can also send you the file too. And what I do is Jim and I do our little thing in the background, and then we post it on my YouTube channel. And it's also on my website, understandingoutonline.com. Take a couple days for it to get on the website because I have to get my web guy to do it. But
it'll be on Substack too.
And it'll be on Substack too. Yeah. So, and I'm following you on Substack at 802 News. Do we want to put some of those clips, links up for everybody, Jim?
Sure.
So if you want to follow Mark, it's 802 News Podcast. And so he was being very humble. He is actually doing this podcast on the local CBS affiliate, WCAX in Burlington, Vermont. 3 years now, Mark?
Just about.
Yep.
Yep.
And so you can find his 802 News podcast there. It's Vermont centric, but still, for those of you who are watching from Vermont, you might not even know about it. So now you do. And Jim, thank you very much. I love having you on to talk about Substack. You know so much. You're my go-to guy on anything Substack, and I'm still trying to get used to notes and a publication, because notes are like posts and a publication is like a website on Substack, and it can be a little confusing sometimes.
Yes. It's all terminology.
Yeah. And you can all follow Jim over on Substack. And the name of Jim's business is Fusion Marketing, FUHS, because it's a play on his last name. And thank you both very much again for being here. And will you please, once we stop broadcasting, will you please hang out in the green room just so we can debrief? Thanks,
Sounds
everybody.
good. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.